Okay, today we're talking about exchange sacrifices and what makes them work. I have a plan. Not only do I have a plan, I have a map. Now this map might be a little bit easy, right? So we're going to start with we win. We win with exchange sacrifices. Okay, now maybe this isn't the ideal place to shoot. We're going over a couple games of two people battling for the World Chess Championship. Dingleren, ja nepomniejsza. Da Nepo. We're going to break down some expert execution and really show what individual elements make these exchange sacrifices work. And what better players to show that than Ding and Nepo? Two of the most attacking, aggressive players. They love exchanging pieces. Let's see them do it in action. The first decisive game of the 2023 World Chess Championship was Game 2. Let's jump into it. Let's go.
The game progresses here with this rare H3 opening. Black's gaining some space over on the queen side. And Ding has an opportunity here to go up a pawn. However, that c5 pawn after the exchange is going to be very weak and hard to hold. So instead of that, he captures. Nepo with some ill intentions, recapturing with the g-pawn. And you can see here that black knight over on the rim is expertly placed. And this insane queenside castle. White's response here looks really natural. It looks like it's a threat. We're going to notice that bishop does keep moving. And we enter our first position. I'll give you a couple seconds here to figure out the best response. And bam! Of course he goes for it. Now, what are all the advantages of this exchange sacrifice? Well, naturally, you're going to get the bishop and the pawn for your rook. So that's 4 points versus 5 points. You're down 1 pawn. What else? That bishop was staring at the d8 rook, and you've eliminated that threat. You've handled one of your opponent's threats. You've moved your own piece forward in the rook. You're about to move that knight forward as well. You have a lot of attacking possibilities, a dynamic position. You've got both bishops, and don't forget that b4 and c4 pawn, really far advanced pawn. So for the price of 1 pawn, Black has all of this initiative and is plowing forward. With the natural recapture, we can see that this rook is just staring down at that queen. We've got the 2 far advanced pawns, and the attack's going to rage on. Couple more moves, and one slight inaccuracy here by White. And there is a huge, huge threat. With the threat of that f3 knight being taken, the d2 rook is hanging, and White has the wrong way of handling this. Apparently, any of these other 3 moves is a better way to handle it. But he moves his king naturally, and in just a couple more moves, the rook is completely out of moves. You can see if he goes here, 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 or here, obviously he gets recaptured. And then, of course, if he moves to d2, he blocks the queen's protection of the c1 square and the pawn queens. So the top engine move here, actually, is for White just to give back a ton of material and play the rest of the game a piece down.
Now let's recap what we saw there. We saw Nepo getting a piece and a pawn for a rook. So he's only down 1 pawn of material. We saw a threat being eliminated. The bishop was attacking the rook. That threat was eliminated. We saw Nepo moving his pieces forward. Not only the rook, he was about to move his knight forward on the next move. We saw dynamic position. We saw Ding with 2 bishops. We saw him with advanced pass pawns. We saw him with all sorts of stuff. Now, what happens next? How does Ding respond to this? Spoiler, he responds with his own exchange sacrifice. We're fast forwarding over to game 4. Let's see what happens.
Okay, so the game starts. We have a 4 knights English. White's queen comes out to defend the knight, and then he just recaptures with the pawn anyway, voluntarily damaging his structure. And then people make a big deal out of this position right here. There's only 1 game in the database, and Richard Rapport is the one who played it. Richard Rapport is Ding's second for this game. And so the game continues. We have this super cool clearance sacrifice, and then the next move by Ding here creates a double threat on the queen and that pawn. It forces Nepo's response. You can see this giant center plowing forward like a locomotive. And here Ding has this really cute tactical defense of the e4 pawn. And in just a couple more moves here, Black really just doesn't have anything to do. All of these moves are the top moves recommended by the engine. Ding has just been slowly improving and will continue to do so. He trades off bishops, and we get to this position, and I believe that everyone knows what's coming next, but why is it coming? And there it is. The sacrifice. We can see here on the board that this knight here is much better than that rook. We're going to get that extra pawn, so we'll get the piece in the pawn. You might be wondering, well, what happens if we just try to defend the pawn here? We'll get en passant, and if the rook captures here, then the pawn just plows forward, the queen gets into the game, attacks the king. There's really just no way to defend that. And so the response is forced. Again, Ding just keeps improving his position. We're bullying around that rook. Ding just keeps pushing forward. And now the knight arrives. And you might be wondering, well, why can't I just take the pawn? Well, if you take with the pawn, you're going to lose your queen. If you take with the queen, thank you very much. I'm going to take your rook and I'm going to go up a piece. And now it's just a matter of conversion. Ding keeps prodding, pushing. You'll notice that the a7 pawn has always been untouchable due to tactics. And right here, the game ends because there's just nothing to do. That pawn is too far advanced. It's too much of a asset. You might be wondering instead, okay, well, what if we just block instead of allowing this? Well, you get checkmated immediately. Ding strikes back. The match is tied again.
Now that was awesome. What did Ding do to strike back? What made it the same? And what was different? So we remember here what Nepo was able to accomplish. Yes? 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 What's a little bit different that Ding was able to do? Obviously, I'm making this up after I film. Hope you don't mind that.
Okay, so filling in the blanks, the things that Ding did differently, his pieces were qualitatively better than Nepo's pieces. And additionally, Nepo's pieces were completely tied down and didn't have anything to do. Nepo's position, he won because his pieces were so dynamic. Ding won because Nepo's pieces were the opposite of dynamic, and he was able to take advantage of it.
Anyway, I'm super late to work. It's time to stop messing around and let's just go.
So we're back in the studio to try our own exchange sacrifices and see what we can take away from Ding and Nepo, what lessons here we can bring forward. What can we expand on too? Spoiler, there is a little bit of expansion as well. We bring our own mix to what makes an exchange sacrifice work, but let's jump right into it. This game opens with e4 and the Sicilian defense. I play the wing gambit. There's going to be a video later on the wing gambit. I love the wing gambit. And we get a little bit of a weird version. That b6 move is definitely a bit rare. And the whole purpose of the wing gambit here is obviously we are going and we're going after the king. We're bringing all of our pieces to the party. There's a potential for this h4, h5 in the wing gambit. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Black commits his f-pawn here. That's a bit of a mistake. I castle. He commits his g-pawn as well. I get my rook up into the center of the board. I'm lining up. And now's the moment. Captures, exchange sacrifice. So what did we have here? We had the bishop attacking the queen. I'm eliminating a threat. I'm moving my own piece forward. And then after the capture, I'm getting a piece and a pawn. That's what happens. I get a second pawn. So now it's a materially equal trade. And then I make a few inaccurate moves. This is a great defensive resource here by black. And luckily for me, black blunders away this e5 square. Obviously, I take immediate advantage of that. I'm going to regain my material. And then you could see here that black's king is fairly open. My king is much, much safer. I do have a material advantage here. And so in a couple more moves, I'm transitioning my queen. I'm moving him over to the queen side, and I'm going to finish this attack. Right now, black doesn't really have anything. Obviously, that f2 pawn is hanging, but right now, I'm threatening take, and a checkmate. There's a common checkmate tactic with the knight covering these two squares, and so takes, black gives up a rook, and right here he resigns. That's our first exchange sacrifice. And so what did we have that was a little bit different? Obviously, we're getting a piece and a pawn. We're moving our own pieces forward. We're removing a threat. And then in this additional one we have, our opponent's king is really, really weak. So the material's not quite as important because his king safety is so low. The whole point of these exchange sacrifices is you're getting a bunch of small returns on investment in order to justify that sacrifice. We're going to close out our last game, bring all our stuff together, seeing that you can kind of pick and choose these advantages in order to analyze and decide whether or not an exchange sacrifice is going to work for you. So let's jump into it. The game opens up with a Scandinavian. In this variation right here, there's an opportunity for white to try to hold on to this pawn. For instance, right here, I could decide to take. However, in doing so, black gets a lot of pressure here, can really prevent this d2 pawn from ever moving forward, and really just exerts a lot of pressure on the position, and really it's going to have a lot more fun playing than I'm going to play. So instead of all that, going back to our position here, I give back the pawn, and then I push forward here c5. What that gives me a queenside majority. I've got 3 pawns here versus 2 pawns here for black. What that means is in the end game, in the long run, I'm going to have a bit of an advantage. If we both castle kingside and I end up pushing these pawns, if we trade off all the pieces, these can make a passed pawn a lot faster and can potentially make a queen. So it's a very, very large asset. Game continues forward. I'm going to skip through this really quickly in order to get to our exchange sacrifice that we have coming up. I don't like this exchange by black. He's giving up dark squared bishops, which, what does that mean for this position right here? Naturally, I'm going to jump into it. I've got this great outpost for my knight. You'll see me immediately plant my knight there. Why not? And then a couple moves later, we have another exchange. I miss an opportunity here right now to take this free pawn, and the next move, I figure out it's available due to that E8 knight being undefended right here. I get that advanced passed pawn. I have 2 connected passed pawns at this point. My rook and my queen are going to be able to start supporting those here very quickly. And then right here's the moment. I think you guys know what our move's going to be. But think for a second, what are all the advantages of it? Why does it work? So naturally, this knight's attacking our rook, so we're eliminating our opponent's threat. That's a common theme in basically all of these. Going back to the Ding and Nepo games, we have advanced passed pawns. They're super, super dangerous. They're a huge, huge liability for our opponent. In this one, that's a little bit different. We're not immediately regaining this E3 pawn. We're actually not going to regain it at all in this game. And so that's a little bit different than what we had before. But then going back to our last game, my game, Black's king. Super, super weak. And so that's another element. You have all of these small elements adding together to make an exchange sacrifice really, really beneficial. So the game continues here. I'm getting ready to push these pawns, obviously with that now a new outpost for my knight. And there's just nothing that Black can do. This pin on the rook is preventing this pawn from being captured. And so I think Black's maybe best continuation is taking this pawn and allowing a queen, though that can't really be that good. The game's over at this point. So going back, what makes an exchange sacrifice work? It's a ton of small advantages. Having an advanced passed pawn, getting a piece and a pawn if you can, or 2 pawns in some cases. You want to eliminate your opponent's threats. You want to move your own pieces forward. If your opponent's king is weak, that's an added bonus. It's all of these small touches that make it work. So, what are you going to do in your next game? Are you going to play all principled chess, or are you going to go for it? And I hope that this video gives you the power to do both. Let's get it.